This is Real Life with Deb Waterbury, a real show for real people with real issues. And now, here's your host, Dr. Deb Waterbury.
Welcome to this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. We are right in the middle of our Boundaries series. And if you joined us last time, if you didn't, I suggest you go back to it. But I was with Angelica Bravo, and we were talking about boundaries with friends. And boundaries it's a weird topic. I talk about it a lot in my office because people have misinterpreted what boundaries are. This is Elisa, Medina.
Hello.
I say her name as badly as I say Angelica's. So I'm from the South, and all you people with these Spanish names, I say them like a Southerner.
You make me sound real nice.
So Elisa's been on the show with me before, and we're in the middle. As I said, I wanted to make sure I had, my two solid people who are going to talk about this topic with me, because boundaries are difficult. Mm-hmm. And what I have found, Elisa, and I don't know if you have or not, but when I'm dealing with women, or even myself, people think, and women think, men do too, I think, that if you put up a boundary, you're putting up a barrier.
Oh, okay.
And that's not true. A boundary is really, like I'd explained in one of the shows, I don't remember which one it was, that a boundary is kind of like what you do with a horse. You put a horse in a stable. You're not cutting the horse off from running. You're just giving him boundaries so he's running in safe places.
Yep. So
a boundary is not a wall. A boundary is a border.
It's protection.
It's protection, yes. And we have to have those. Mm-hmm. So today we're talking about boundaries at work. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, some people work at church, some people don't work at church, some people just, work at being at home with their kids. That's a big work. And yeah. So we have to set up those same kinds of boundaries there. And sometimes that's really difficult when you feel the responsibility of, I'm getting a paycheck. Right. And if you're working in a secular place, the responsibility of, representing Jesus appropriately while you're still putting up boundaries between yourself and, someone who's maybe not a believer.
Yeah.
That's really hard. There's so many ways that this can get very tricky.
Agreed.
So let me read a couple of scriptures. I always, when I'm doing these and praying over each of the shows, the Lord always gives me just a few verses. And that kind of always tells me the direction he wants the show to go in, or at least the topics because, these could go in all different ways. Sure. And so when he gives me a couple of verses, then I can see, okay, Father, I see kind of where you want to go. And then the discussion will go that direction. Mm-hmm. Holy Spirit's in charge. The first one that he gave me was in Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. And he said, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Good. It is good. I just finished writing it. Just actually went out a study on Colossians, and Colossians is such a cool book because it really is Paul writing to the church in Colossae who had been led astray by all kinds of weird teachings. Mm-hmm. And basically he just said, he didn't tell them, wasn't yelling them. He just said, love you guys. So let's get back to the basics. Yeah. And then he just says, here's who Jesus is. Here's the gospel. Here's what you need to do. Yeah. It is so practical. And this is one of those practical pieces of advice that Paul gives the church in Colossae. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Mm. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? And I thought it was interesting. God gave me those two right next to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I saw it, I was looking through scriptures, and I really felt led to use 2 Corinthians 6:14. It's interesting to me, the concept of don't be unequally yoked, but let your speech be flavorful. Yeah. And there is a way to do that with proper borders. Mm-hmm. And last one was Psalm 147:14. He makes peace in your borders. He fills you with the finest of wheat.
That's the one that resonated so much with my heart.
Really?
Yes.
Why? Tell me why.
Because I think a life without boundaries is a life without peace. That's true. So whenever you invite me onto the show, the Lord's like, hey, we've been working on this. So as a recovering workaholic, I think that's really, really true for me. And now that I'm starting my own business and recognizing the lack of boundaries that I've had over my life, God is so gracious to bring that to my attention and say, hey, this is an area that I really want you to pay attention to. And so one of the things I was thinking in preparing for this is, how do you know if you don't have good boundaries?
How do you? Elisa, how did you? I mean, I know how I do, but I want to hear how you do, because I'm sure how I do is not nearly as nice as how you do.
Oh, I don't know. I think going back to the peace thing, when we don't have good boundaries, our body really responds. The people around us, I actually just talked about this on a Facebook Live recently. If maybe a spouse or a friend questions you about something like, hey, Debbie, you might be working too much, and you get defensive, you might not have good boundaries.
That's good.
If you're spending a lot of time on your phone, I know our phones are such amazing tools these days.
Because I hope my husband's not watching this. She doesn't mean it, Jeff.
She thought this was for everyone else.
Exactly, but me.
We kind of have these responses that let us know if we have good boundaries or not.
Yes.
So fatigue, if you're tired every day, if you're weary every day, the work of the Lord is supposed to be light and easy.
Yes.
Not that we're not posturing in battle, but when we don't have boundaries, when we're working from the moment we wake up to the time we go to bed, we don't have good boundaries.
And there's so many things that can drive you to do that.
Yes.
And the things that drive you to do that are the places in your heart that the Lord wants to get rid of anyway.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, and I do tend to be a workaholic as well, and and that's why I was making that comment about my husband, because he gets irritated. I don't stop ever. Yeah. And there are some days I don't stop. And we're on when I come home at night and I'm sitting on the couch, you can ask my assistant. She laughs because she'll send me something just and think, oh, she can take care of it in the morning. And I'm like, ding, 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 I got to do it right then. Because that's just my personality. But it's also my overachievement. And the bondages that I've had with feeling that I had to do that in order to be a success and or be accepted and loved and valued and nurtured by other people, which was fully a bondage.
But it's always an identity issue.
It is always an identity issue. And even though I know that I've moved in healing in those things, my habits are still the same.
Right.
Which is, you have to kind of recognize that you might be healed or in the healing process. We're never all healed on this side of glory.
Right.
But you might be, in a much healthier place in terms of identity. Yes. But your habits, you're still habitually being that person.
Yeah. I call that our standard operating system or our flesh, right? The thing that we do without even thinking about it. And so, this is why I love this topic so much, because at work, at church, in ministry, in friendships, we overstep our boundaries all the time.
All the time.
And again,
And why do you think we do that, Elisa? Why do you think we tend to either overstep them or not have them?
I think it goes back to, again, our identity. Like, if we're believing a lie that this won't get done without me.
Oh, dear.
Or, if this is my drink of water, this is where I go to feel fulfilled. And
oh, dear, yes.
Yeah, we become deceived in that. And so, I've learned I need to, and again, we haven't arrived. I'm getting better at this. Kind of put myself in a timeout for a minute.
Yes.
Like, is this an emergency? Because in seasons of my life, everything felt like an emergency.
Yes.
When it was so silly. It was like, I don't have to answer this text right now. I don't have to answer this email right now. What's going on in me that makes me think, and it always came back to, if I was real honest, this person's view of me, the achievement thing that you talked about. And so I think that's really the root of the issue. Are we a rescuer, right? Are we hero coaching? Are we going above and beyond? But there's always a cost when we don't have good boundaries.
And that doesn't mean that you are not a person of excellence.
Of course.
And I think that's always, that get the blurring that if you're not a person of excellence if you're not putting in 800% all the time.
Right.
When in reality, that's absolutely not a person of excellence. Because a woman or a man of excellence is one who understands priorities and boundaries.
Yeah.
And can do these things in an excellent manner as unto the Lord.
And free. I'm reading a book right now called The Unhurried Life. And it's, so someone like me, when I got that book, I was like, I don't even know if I want to read that book. But it's studying Jesus's life. And, you can say a lot of things about Jesus, but one thing we can, I think, all agree on is he was never in a hurry.
Amen.
So he was free to be preaching to the crowds. He was free to minister one-on-one. He was free to rest. Yes. He was free to be in fellowship with the Father. And as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, why is that so hard for us?
That's such a good, I got to read that book.
Yeah.
That part of me doesn't want to read it.
Yeah.
It is because I have a really good friend that many years ago, she had told me something that stuck with me. She said, Deb, if you're running ahead of God because he never runs.
No.
She said, God is a God of he's methodical. He will always just move slowly, and he's going to move with purpose.
Yeah.
So if you begin running at something, you've run ahead of him. Yeah. And that was a mind-blowing image for me, but also understanding that I have a tendency to do that. Yeah. And then when you don't have those healthy boundaries, especially at work, right. Either with how much work you do, or, there has to be healthy boundaries if you are in a secular place between you and people.
Yes.
Or not between, I shouldn't say, around you and other people, because we can't be influenced to ungodliness and ungodly behavior, and sometimes pressure to overwork, pressure to go out, drinking, have a drink with your boss, pressure to do those things because you are at work. Those things, if we don't already have boundaries set up, it's very difficult to place them later on.
I think we all need to have some non-negotiables, and in the most simple of situations, like, again, I'm not going to check my email from my bed. This is something that I'm really working on. Or in the workplace, or even, when you're involved in clubs or sports or things, my daughter's into softball, there are just certain things that, are non-negotiables for us.
Yes.
And that ahead of time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a really healthy part of boundary setting is who am I?
Yes.
Who am I really? Who am I in Christ, so that I don't have to fit in?
Yes.
I don't have to go out after. I don't have to be rude or prude or any of those things.
No.
But you've just already decided, this is an area that I'm not going to
I'll go this far and no further.
Yeah.
That's literally that Mordecai statement. I will go this far and no further. That's really good. And, we always have to keep the hierarchy at the front of our minds. Yeah. It is always God, our spouse if we're married, children if you have them. And then, your work is even if your work is at church, it's way down here. Yeah. And we're going to do a show here in I think it's the next episode on boundaries at church. Mm-hmm. And that is a difficult thing sometimes, because you think we get, work for God and putting God and work for God on the same level.
Right.
Work is work, and work is down here. Relationship with God is at top.
Yes.
And then then husband and family, or just whatever family you have there, and then friends, and then work is right down
it's supposed to be. But you know what? I think we like the work. I'm at home now with my kids, who I adore, but they're not super grateful for the things that I do. They're not sending me emails saying job well done, or, applauding me for the lunches I make them, and I make them really good lunches. But at work, you get those words of affirmation.
That's true.
You get that you're doing such a good job. You're walking. So again, if we're looking at our validation coming from people, you're certainly going to do that in a work setting.
That's true. That's a good point, Elisa. And so looking at what's motivating you. What is your motivation? And if you can name your motivation, you'll be able to name where your boundaries need to get better, or at least where they exist or need to exist. And speaking as one who has I do have had an issue with boundaries at work. I've in the past had issues with boundaries with friends. I don't have that so much anymore. Boundaries at church, boundaries at work, those have been very big issues for me, as what we claim as an overachiever. Yeah. And many of us are overachievers, especially as believers, because we want God to be pleased with us.
Right.
And so because we want God to be pleased with us, which the beautiful thing is He is, regardless of what you do. God's not interested in what you do. He's interested in your heart. Yeah. If we could just get ourselves wrapped around that. But the thing is understanding, I get it's hard to do boundaries, especially at work, because of that need for affirmation, that need to feel like you are a person of excellence, that you are giving it your 100%. And that is, truly a biblical principle. We're not to be lazy. We're not to, do things halfway, but we have to have priorities, and you have to have boundaries that are already set. And you've made that point. It's such a good one. Absolutely. If you have any comments, like if you got some stuff you want to tell, because Elisa and I don't claim to be experts on this.
No.
It's like we were talking about right before we started. Yeah, I'm so bad at this, which is really what qualifies us to talk about it. So if you have some suggestions, some experiences that you'd like to share, please comment below. Otherwise, we have loved having you. I pray that you have a wonderful week, and do not forget those boundaries. Thanks, Elisa.
Thank you.
See y'all later. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. I hope it's been a blessing to you as much as it was to me. You know, if you want any of my books or information on articles or any of my speaking engagements, you can go to my website at debwaterbury.com. God bless you.